I'd like to show you how to initially configure a Cisco Catalyst switch. Here we have a 3500 series switch, 24 ports, Ethernet ports on the front, which you would hook up to other switches, to routers, to PCs, to LAN printers, etc. That's the interesting part once the switch is ready to go, but before it's on the network with an IP address, first of all, you have to power it up, and we have our power plug. And your switch will indeed ship with a country appropriate power cable. And then to do the initial configuration, you need to connect to the switch. Here's the console port. It's an RJ45 jack, but RJ45 does not necessarily imply Ethernet. In this case, it's a serial connection. And your switch will come with a cable like this. There's an RJ45 jack on one side, which will obviously plug into the console port. And then the other side of this cable won't be familiar to some of the newer people to the industry. This is an RS-232 female port, and it was pretty standard on desktop PCs as well as laptops in the past to have an RS-232 port on them. And then this would hook right into your PC. But nowadays USB, Universal Serial Bus, has taken over. RS-232 isn't very common anymore, so you'll likely need an adapter, something that looks like this, which has a RS-232 port on one side, USB plug on the other. So I'm going to go ahead and get this stuff hooked up. I'm going to plug in the RS-232 ports together. I'm going to plug this in to my laptop. And I'm going to bring up my terminal emulator. With the USB adapter, the serial to USB adapter hooked up, I've now launched my terminal emulator. And I have to tell it to use the serial. And the adapter is hooked up to COM5 on my PC. And the speed, 9600 baud with 8 data bits, no parity, and 1 stop bit. So it's 9600, 8, and 1. That's pretty standard for console connections across all network devices. I'll click Connect. Now let me power up the switch, and we'll watch the power on self-test and do an initial configuration. So the switch is now booting. You can see it's loading its operating system from flash. Once it has its operating system loaded, it will boot and it will do power on self-tests. Generally, we don't watch the power on self-test every time we boot a switch, but if it's misbehaving and you power cycle, you might want to watch and make sure that for each of the things we see begin, that it passed, begin, that it passed, and it scrolls off the screen. So our switch is now powered up and ready. You can see it said press return to get started here. So I'll go ahead and hit enter on my keyboard, and we now see the command line. The default host name for a Cisco iOS switch is switch, so you see that reflected on the command line. I'm going to use the enable command to get to privileged mode, and there is no enable password configured just yet, so we got to privileged mode without typing in any special password. And we could at this point use configure terminal and configure the switch from scratch. I'm going to show you a shortcut that's available for a new router, a new switch. We can use the setup script. If I hit enter, it'll say, do you want to continue with the configuration dialog? And I'm going to hit Y for yes. And it'll say we can do a basic management setup. If we don't do the basic management setup, we'll do an extended setup, and it will ask us to configure each interface on the system. Well, I don't want to go through configuring 24 ports right now in this quick demo, so I'm going to say yes, let's just do basic management. And what do we want the host name to be? I'll be not terribly creative. I'll call it SW1. And it asks for an enable secret. I will make that san-fran with a capital S and a capital F. That's not a great enable secret. Someone could guess that pretty easily, but it works well enough in demo mode. And an enable password will be configured as well. So I'll do Cisco123. Now with both an enable password and an enable secret, the enable secret wins. VTY password for getting on to the switch via telnet or via SSH. We have VTY passwords, and I will type in Cisco123 for that as well. Do we want to configure SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol? If you have something like HP OpenView or another network management system that's going to be monitoring this switch, you could configure it. I'm going to go ahead and click or just hit enter to accept the default value of no, and it lists all of the interfaces that are on the switch, and it says which one of these will be used for IP communications. And I'm going to say VLAN 1, and to give it an IP address. Do we want to configure this for IP? Yes, we do. And the IP address will be 10.10.1.4, and subnet mask 255.255.255.0. And what I like to enable a cluster command switch that allows multiple switches to be managed as one unit. This is a standalone switch, so I'll say no. And here's the configuration that was put in place. You can see that it did configure passwords on line VTY 0 through 15. SNMP server was disabled. The host name, enable secret, and enable password are configured. And the IP address for VLAN 1 is set to 10.10.1.4. And we get asked, do we want to save this configuration, or do we want to go back through the script? And I'm going to just hit enter to accept number 2, save the configuration and exit. And we now have a switch that has a minimal, but it does have a configuration, and it could be hooked up to a network.